we have the privilege of doing our work, of figuring out what is the work that we're here to do, and then doing that to the best of our abilities. And it's not our responsibility or any of our concern, or frankly, any of our business to worry about how that work is perceived or to worry about acquiring the fruits of that work. So the labor itself is the gift, not the fruits of the labor. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of ShiShi Meditations. And today, what I want to talk about is dealing with rejection. And this is something that we all have to go through in life, whether it's in our relationships, social life, or our career, or whatever it might be. And the reason that this is on my mind lately is because last week I actually went through this. I was requested by an artist to make a remix. So this artist, she had just put out a single, and she was looking for people to remix her song that would then come out on like a remix EP on her label. And it was a really cool opportunity because the original song was really dope. The artist was really cool, and she's signed to a pretty big label. So it was also a great opportunity to get my music out there to more people and get my name and my brand some more exposure. And the coolest part was that she hit me up and was like, "I love your music. I would love for you to remix this." So it was really exciting when it happened. And I kind of put everything else, all the other musical projects that I had been working on the back burner, and just was like, okay, I'm just going to focus on this one thing, and really prioritized it. And I worked really hard on this remix for this artist, and I sent it over to her manager. A couple days later, they got back to me and saying, "Yeah, we're going to pass on this. Like, thank you so much for your time and your effort, but we decided not to use this, or not to include it in our plans for the remix pack release." It's funny because for all of the intellectualizing that I do about dealing with rejection and not taking stuff personally, and being spiritually evolved enough to navigate through those kinds of difficult things, when it actually happens in your life, like as an experience and something that you really care about, it's like all that theory and all that sort of like information in your head. That's the time when it really gets put to the test. It's one thing to intellectually understand something, but it's another thing when you're tested in a real way in your life, somatically, to see how you respond. And I think that's really the test of whether the knowledge has been transmuted and absorbed deep into your body as wisdom, rather than just thoughts that are kind of floating on the surface. And so, to be honest, when I got this news, it was pretty rough. I felt really down for a couple days, because I had put all this work into this project, and it didn't work out the way that I wanted it to. And it's so funny how immediately my mind started jumping to all of these like really intense conclusions about what that means. I had all these like super debilitating thoughts about like, wow, like I'm just not a good artist, and I'm not musically talented enough, and I'm never going to make it as an artist, and I should just stop. And then I started looking at the actual remix, and I was like, well, okay, like what could I have done better? Like, what maybe this wasn't strong enough, or that wasn't strong enough. And I was like, all these thoughts about like, my music is cheesy, it's not cool, whatever. And it's just funny how, when something that you invest a lot of your energy into is finally placed up against the world for judgment, and when that judgment comes back in a way that is not favorable to you, when something that you put a lot of work into is judged in a negative light, and is not seen in the way that you had hoped that it would be perceived, how quickly we are to take personally the things that we work really hard on and put out into the world when they're not judged positively, when they're not judged in the way that we had hoped that they would be judged. And how quickly we are to look at that thing and immediately see it as a reflection of our own self-worth, of our own self-importance and uniqueness as a human being, and our own worthiness of love and peace and satisfaction within ourselves. And I think this is just it's a behavior of the mind, and it's really part of the human condition. It's the double-edged sword of having an ego. And on the one hand, the ego is really important because it helps us to protect ourselves and make decisions based on what we want and have a will and an intention to try to manifest and create things in this world. But on the other hand, the dark side of the ego is that it can tend to make us take everything super personally. And if left unchecked, it can very quickly grow into narcissism. And I think narcissism can come in two forms. There's the classic narcissism where it's like, oh, this person is narcissistic because he or she only thinks about him or herself, and just very like cocky and arrogant. But I think feeling bad about yourself, feeling like you're not as good as you want to be, or feeling like because something that you did was rejected or judged poorly, then that is a direct reflection of your character as a human being or your worth. And victimizing yourself is in its own way a form of narcissism. It's equally narcissistic because you're still just completely thinking about yourself. You're still just completely self-centered, and not thinking about the fact that, anytime somebody reacts to you or something that you do, at least 50% of their reaction is going to be based on their own life experience as a totally separate conscious human being than you, and their own tastes and personality and attitudes and perceptions. And it's very easy to just try to make everything about you, especially in the situations when, in emotionally polarizing situations, whether it's emotionally polarizing in the bad way when you're just very negatively judged, or it's emotionally polarizing in the great way when everybody thinks you're great, and I've had that as well, where I put out a song and it does really well and people really like it. And then I find myself being like, wow, like I'm the man, like I'm dope. Like I made this dope song. Like I'm super talented and artistic or whatever. And the reality is that neither of those things are true. The reality is that you are not a solid, stable, static thing. You're a limitless being with infinite potential that can be manifested and processed by the world and the consciousness of those around you in a myriad of different ways. And it's not really our job or up to us necessarily to decide how we're going to be perceived, how we're going to come across, or to try to control that, or how our work is going to come across. It's up to us to figure out what is the deepest, truest expression of what we're trying to create and say while we're here on this earth, and to just do that work, and then just, let the chips fall where they may. And on that note, I'll just end this video with one of my favorite books of all time. It's called the Bhagavad Gita, and it's actually like a holy Hindu scripture and text. But what I like about it is it's very non-sectarian. Like there's nothing in there that's like, oh, if you don't believe this Hindu belief or whatever, then like you're gonna, you're screwed, or you're gonna go to hell. Not to call it any other religions, but it's very non-sectarian. And one of my favorite kind of core messages from that book is that as human beings, we have the privilege of doing our work, of figuring out what is the work that we're here to do, and then doing that to the best of our abilities. And it's not our responsibility or any of our concern, or frankly, any of our business, to worry about how that work is perceived, or to worry about acquiring the fruits of that work. So the labor itself is the gift, not the fruits of the labor. And I think, going through experiences where you do get rejected, or something that you put a lot of effort into doesn't pan out the way you want, it can be a very difficult, but also a very beautiful way to learn that lesson, and to really look at your rejections, not as rejections, but as teachings and as blessings, can be a great way to remind you that the inherent gift is the process itself. It's not the fact that the real joy was me making that remix, was me sitting down and doing what I love, which is making music, not the outcome. You know, obviously I would have loved for it to be accepted and released, but that doesn't change the fact that I received a lot of joy from actually doing the remix. And a final quote that just came to my mind that I'll end with is, I forget who said this, but I'll try to link to it in the description. But the quote goes along the lines of, in a normal person's mind, there are only victories and losses. In the warrior's mind, there are only challenges. And again, you know, that's just kind of re-emphasizing the fact that when you come across a perceived loss or rejection, to look at it as a challenge and say, how can this help me deepen my relationship with myself and deepen my appreciation for the gift that I have to do the work that I'm here to do. And then, you know, when you do have the wins, you can look at those as challenges too and say, how can I really enjoy this and soak it in, you know, and not be afraid of losing the feeling that it's giving me, knowing that it's temporary, and not allow it to corrupt my mind into thinking that I'm amazing because this thing happened, you know? So I hope that is helpful to you guys. And this is just kind of me riffing off the top of a recent rejection, if you want to call it that, or I'd rather call it a learning experience or challenge or gift or blessing that I had. So with that, I will talk to you guys soon. Peace.